I wrote this out and speaking with friends over the years, many people told me how exhausted they are by the time they reach the first Seder. I can understand, as I served as, on many occasions when I was a rabbi, I served at, as the person in charge of the Seder that we had, to invite all the people who didn't have a place to go. And I witnessed firsthand all the cleaning, koshering, and pesach food production and the serving of amazing foods all hours of the day and night. But is eating, consuming kosher for Passover food the entire focus of this 8-day Chag? To illustrate this point, allow me to share with you a story that I wrote. At first, I thought it was very cute. It's worthwhile to listen to. Yidel, a Jew, and Ivan, a Russian, both were always in need of a good meal. A week before Pesach, Yidel told Ivan that he went to the synagogue on the first night of Passover and pretended that he was a Jew. He would surely get an invitation to a Seder. A few weeks after the holiday, when they met, Yidel expected a hug and a big thank you. Instead, Ivan, the Russian, yelled and cursed him. He told Yidel, I went to the synagogue and I was invited to a Seder. The table was set beautifully. The house was full of aroma of the cooked food. I sat down and waited to be served. But first, they began by chanting in Hebrew. After a while, they gave me a cup of wine, some parsley, and salt water. Meanwhile, they kept on swaying and reading Hebrew. I was almost faint with hunger. An hour passed, and I thought I would go mad. At last, everyone got up and washed their hands, and so did I. Then they gave me a flat, tasteless wafer and a vegetable I had never seen before. I took a huge bite, and all of a sudden, my eyes started to tear. I began to choke, and my insides were burning. They must have known that I wasn't Jewish, so I got up from the table, I ran out of the house, and I'm sure that you put them up to it. Oh, my friend Ivan said to Yidel, if only you would have been a little more patient, you would have enjoyed all the delicious food that was going to be served. This is what a Seder is, a great deal of chanting, singing, and a great deal of talking and learning. It requires much patience, but a meal par excellence for a Jew consists of far more than food. Yeah. I thought it was a cute story that I had heard some time back, and it's worthwhile repeating. Anyway, the reason why we're here today is basically, I know all of you attend Sidorim, and the interesting part, the important part of a Seder is the fact that people participate. Just to go ahead and go through the ritual and everything else, I think you know the rituals, you know what you're going through, and there's no need for me to educate you on that, because basically all of you have gone through this and will go through it again. But I think the important part of this is, of any Seder, is the participation of the people who participate in the Seder. In other words, if you have a Seder and one person is the guy in charge and goes through the whole thing, it lacks something. We want people to, what the important part of a Seder is that people ask questions, and the people some people have answers, people participate, people go ahead and think of questions as they go along, and that makes the Seder what it is. So a Seder usually doesn't last an hour or 2 hours. The Seder can usually last an average, I would say the average Seder that's done the proper way lasts at least 4 hours or so. Because basically when people start asking questions, others answer. But the important thing is that you should be able to find the questions to ask. And I have here, I laid out a series of questions, and I have answers also, so you can give them the same. If you ask the questions, if you have the answer, it makes it even smarter. So I'll have the answers for you as well, okay? So I'm going to start from the beginning, right from the beginning of the Seder, okay? First of all, what do we call that night? We call it a Seder, right? And yet, if you take a look at the Seder, if a stranger comes like this, Ivan came, it's almost like a disorder, okay? When do we have a Seder? Shabbos night, for instance, Friday night, when you come out from home for shul, you make Kiddush, you make the brach on the challah, etc., and the meal is served. There's an order there, right? The same thing with Yom Tov. After Kiddush, like we do on Shabbos, we also have the same, or we have an order. We know what to expect. You know when to expect the food, you know when to be able to sit down, etc. So how come on Pesach we don't, we start with, what do? We start with washing, and we have we have serve the vegetable, and we serve it, we pray, we wash without making a bracha, and then we invite people, and with certain of the things that we recite, we invite people to come to the Seder this year, or next year, etc. We talk and we talk and we talk, we don't eat yet. So basically, why do we call this a Seder? What is the definition of Seder? Order, right? There seems to be no order, right? So the answer is that there is order. There is a system, actually. There is an order to our pesach. And basically, let's see what is the order. One of the points is, first of all, the whole idea of the Seder is this is brought in the Gemara, basically, is to pass on the whole idea to the children, number one. We eat a green vegetable. We're going to go into that in detail later on. We ask 4 questions, right? We steal the afikoman, okay? And then we have a dialogue, between children and parents. They ask a question, and each person has to feel that he or she personally left Egypt. In other words, basically what we're doing here, we're trying to go ahead and make everyone. In fact, I think it's a Sephardic minute. When they start the Seder, they come with they dress up, and they come with a pack that they carry on their back, and they walk around the table several times to point out that they were wandering Jews leaving Egypt, etc. That's a Sephardic minute. I never saw, but I heard about it, and I understand they all do. But you notice basically that we have also a Seder, except our Seder involves many more steps than the ordinary Shabbos and the ordinary Yom Tov. In other words, we go through a whole procedure, okay? Rav Soloveitchik makes a point basically that the story of the Seder of the Exodus is similar to the practice of the study of the oral law. In other words, basically, what is, when we study the Talmud, what is the basic idea of a Talmud when we study, if you've ever studied? It's basically asking questions and getting answers. And basically, what do we do over here? We also have the same thing. We have questions and we have answers. It's a step-by-step order from Kiddush to Nirtzah. And it actually, if you take a look and you count all the steps that we take, that adds up to 15 steps. 15 steps. So what is it's 15? Does 15 mean anything? And the point is that the number 15 is not accidental. We have where else do we find 15 in Jewish life? First of all, your King David, you know that he composed most of all the Shir HaMalos. And if you take a look at the Shir HaMalos, when you say Tehillim, or when you sing some of them, the Shir HaMalos was written by David HaMelech, and there are 15 of them actually. Okay, where do we have another 15? If you saw a picture of the temple, you find that there are 15 steps that lead from one level, from the level of the Ezra Noshim to the level where the Kohanim start performing their duties. It has 15 steps. And on those 15 steps, you usually have Leviim, who are the choir. They sing on those 15 steps. So you see that the number 15, the number that we use, that we really end up with the Seder, has precedence in other things as well. Okay. By the way, if you want to ask any question, you're welcome to do that. Okay. So basically, this is what we mean by the Seder. Now let's go to the next step. I'll try to go sort of follow an order here, so that basically, so you can follow that. If you open up your Haggadah, you can follow it. I'm going from here to the Kiddush. Okay. The Kiddush is the first thing that we do. And we basically make a Kiddush like we do on every Yom Tov. And if you take a look at the Kiddush that you say actually every Yom Tov, if you take a close look at it, you say, sir, I don't know if you ever bothered trying to translate it, but part of the Kiddush says, Asher Bocha Bocha Mikolam. I don't know if it sounds familiar to you. or Kibono Bachato, Vasono Kidashto, Mikol Ho'amim, sound familiar to you?
Yeah.
That's the Yom Tov Kiddush. And basically, what happens, you're saying, what is Hashabach Bon Mikolam? It means that you selected us, you took us out from all the other nations to be a nation, close to you. That's the first one, Hashabach Bon Mikolam. The second one says, in the same Kiddush, it says, that you selected us and made us holy from all the people. So you have really a repetition over there in the same Kiddush. And the question is, why do we say both these things in the same Kiddush? It's just a question that anybody can ask when a person makes Kiddush. How come it's repetitious? And the answer is that actually each Ashabach Abonim we call refers to one type of a incident. And the second part, Kibono Bachata Vesona Kedashta Mikol Amim, is another part. The first part refers to Avram, and basically it refers to also the destruction of the Tower of Babel, or how do you say? I don't know, say it in English.
Babel.
Anyway, the first one refers to in other words, at that point, Hashem created. He had the languages that changed. Every country had their own language, and Avram retained the language of Ivrit. Now, what is the second? So therefore, what is the second one for? The second one refers to Jews receiving the Torah on Mount Sinai. So in other words, basically, when we say Kibono B'charta V'Sana Kedashta Mikol Amim, that you selected us and made us holy from all the nations. How did you make us different from all the nations? Before we weren't different than anybody else, but the fact that Hashem gave us the Torah on Mount Sinai made us unique. We had the Torah, and we had the Torah which was given to us on Mount Sinai. And as you know, the first two the Ten Commandments. The first two were given by Hashem. The Jews could not handle it, so they asked Moshe to complete the rest of the Ten Commandments. And then Moshe spent the rest of the time teaching the Torah and the oral law. So basically, the Kiddush refers to both of these incidents. The first one refers to Abraham, and the second one refers to Moshe Rabbeinu. Then we also have the final words of the Kiddush. We say, Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim. Okay? In other words, if you take a look at the Kiddush, I don't know if you have the Kiddush, but the Kiddush always ends with Yisrael v'Hazmanim. What does it mean, Yisrael v'Hazmanim? I'm sorry, I'm going to be disturbed. Okay. Please forgive me for the phone calls on you. It's my birthday today, so I'm going to get calls. I'm going to get calls. I don't want to interrupt the talk, but please forgive me, okay? Anyway, the final words of the Kiddush is Baruch Atah Hashem. If you take a look at your Kiddush, Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim. The question is this: basically, we understand that Hashem Mekadesh Yisrael, that Hashem made the Jewish people holy. And v'Hazmanim, what is Hazmanim? Hazmanim means basically sanctified time. So what does the linear of time have to do at all with what makes it holy? What does the time have to do at all with the Kiddush? And I think it's very important to point out the fact that time plays a major role in the Jewish religion. For instance, let's take Pesach. Let's see, where is it? First of all, let's take Shabbos. Let's start from the beginning. Shabbos, where does time play a role on Shabbos? We start Shabbos at exactly a certain time. It's said every week differently. You have to look to see when you light the candle, right? So time is very important. Not only that, basically, with the length of the Shabbos is also a question of time. We finish Shabbos at a certain time, so time is very important in regards to Shabbos. But we can go beyond that, basically, because let's go to Pesach, okay? Pesach, what plays a big role? What kind of role does Pesach play? Where in Pesach do you play? Do you know of any role that we saw? On matzah.
No, month in the month.
What?
month in the sun.
The month when it takes place, right? Nisan, okay. But did you ever think of it, matzah? How do you make matzah?
18 minutes.
Exactly 18 minutes. If it goes a minute beyond, it's no good. In other words, if you ever, probably, I don't know how many of you ever saw them make matzah in the factory. We used to take the kids from shul every time, to the matzah factory. And one of the things they saw is that basically the women who used to go out and mix the water and the flour, etc., and everything was fine until it got to the baking. The baking had to be washed very carefully by somebody who was a mashgiach, because you were not allowed to go ahead and bake it more than 18 minutes. Probably most of the time they take it off before, but 18 minutes is the maximum that you can allow a matzah to bake. If it bakes any more, it's invalid. You can't, even though it looks like a matzah and tastes like a matzah, it's not valid for pesach. Okay, so time is important. Candle lighting every Friday night, etc. I mean, if you go through the Jewish religion, you find time always plays a major role. The next question I want to ask is, why is Moshe's name not mentioned in the Haggadah? Did you ever think of that? Go ahead.
Not to confuse it with a human being, because at the time, Christianity came into existence, and the rabbis didn't want to give any special kavod to a human being, because they were pushing.
That's a very good point. In other words, they didn't want to go and make Moshe another Jesus or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. It's interesting. I didn't look at it from that point of view. But I think at that point, there's no mention of his name also because of the fact that I think the children at the time when the Jewish people left Egypt, the children were with the grandparents in Midian at the time, and Moshe was there. That's why Moshe was the most important part of the whole Yetzias Mitzrayim. But Moshe basically was sort of like he said, he was the important person, the most important person. But they didn't want to make Moshe a god like Jesus, etc. Yes. Any question on that? Yes.
But it's mentioned one time, please.
Yeah. And so it was left off for that reason. Very good. Yes. Shoot.
What was Haggadah actually?
I can't think. I'm sorry.
Haggadah, when did it start?
When was the Haggadah written? I'll be honest with you. I don't know. Do you have an idea?
It's a compilation over time.
Okay.
So we can't say it had a specific date.
Yeah, somebody again. If you asked me the question before, I would have tried to look it up, because basically there was a compilation of all the material that was put in there. Because as you will find, there were certain people that I'm going to mention later on, who were mentioned in the Haggadah. So it must have taken place after the time of the Amoraim. But basically, who put it together, etc. It's a very good question. It's something I think we should basically look up and see, when did this whole Haggadah start? Actually, when was the first time that we said, okay? What's the vegetable that we usually start with? You know? What is it called? Do you have any idea? No, that's not the vegetable. What is it called? Okay. Well, so the question is basically, what is kapas? Okay. So that basically, many people use it's primarily put in basically to arouse the curiosity of children. But the truth of the matter is this: that kapas had a certain value to the Jewish people. What is that? First of all, what does kapas mean? Kapas is considered basically it was first met the only other time. In fact, here it's a vegetable, name of vegetable. But the only other time that the word kapas was used was in the time of Achashverosh. Okay, Achashverosh. If you heard the meal when they described the clothing he was wearing, the word kapas is mentioned. okay? But where does it first, it's mentioned one other time before? And that is the time of, in time of Joseph's lifetime. What did Joseph's father do for Joseph? Do you recall the story? What did he make for him? He made for him special?
Out of many.
Okay, a coat of many colors. Anyway, Rashi mentions one of the colors is one is copper. So that's the other time mentioned. So the question that now is, if that's the important thing that is met about Yosef, why basically what's the word copper used here? They could have used anything for a vegetable. Why copper? You know, if you look back, the connection to Yosef, you begin to realize that it was important. Why? Because what was the issue with Yosef and the multicolored skirt? What was
Jealousy of the
what there
brother.
was a jealousy of the brothers, right? That's why that was one of the things that was highlighted. This was one of the things that caused problems for Yosef. They were jealous of him, and the truth of the matter is that Yaakov did play favoritism, and he made things for him, and there was a good reason why they were jealous. But because of that, that was one of the items that caused the jealousy. But the end result was what happened to Yosef. You know the story of Yosef. Yosef was sold to the Midianites. The whole story of Yosef, I'm not going to go over the whole story, because I'm sure you know that. But basically, when it comes down to it, the enmity between Yosef and his brothers developed early in his lifetime, and it took a whole part of the history to get back to the point where Yosef revealed himself who he was, etc., and then made peace at the time. But the point is this: that the mention of Coppas. So the question you have to ask is this: why is Coppas mentioned here? Why? What? So if it's supposed to remind you of Yosef and his relationship, why is it brought here? Why doesn't it mention in the Haggadah?
Because they got liberated, so we have to.
It's just to teach us a lesson, basically. To teach us a lesson that we should go ahead and know that jealousy can come very easily, and we should not replicate the history of Yosef with his father, with other people. In other words, basically, Coppas is a reminder of something. That's the important thing, okay? Yeah, and basically, I just want to see something here. Yeah, the rabbis wanted to recall the story of Joseph, the enmity for Joseph, and because of the hate of one Jew to another, it led to Mitzrayim. And what happened when we left, we needed to show that we're united. And how did they show that we're united? They had to change the hatred to love, and they had to show unity. So how did they end up, the Jewish people, showing unity? First of all, there was blood that was put on the doorposts of before they were eating the Paschal lamb. As you know, if you recall correctly, the Paschal lamb that was brought had to be eaten by the family as a whole. They never ate it separately. And also we had to dip the blood. We had to dip twice during the Manish Tana. Basically, we mentioned the fact that we dip twice a night, or the dipping of the Paschal lamb, etc., and on the doorpost, etc. All that refers to the fact that the Jews had to do things together. They had to be united and be together, basically. In other words, the lesson is, don't get into a situation where there's going to be jealousy in the family. Next, we come to the beginning of the Haggadah. So what is the first thing that we read in the Haggadah? Olach Ma'anya, right? Olach Ma'anya is written in what language? Aramaic. Okay, the question is, basically, that's the only paragraph in the entire Haggadah that's written in Aramaic.
Why?
Well, that's a good question. We're going to answer that. Okay. First of all, why is it written in Aramaic? Number one. Second of all, it mentions, it has I don't know if you translated the Halak Ma'anya, but I don't want to go and go over the whole thing. But basically, it says several things. It says, "Called this." It has an invitation to invite people to come to, need to eat. And it actually mentions, twice to the fact that they should come to eat. So the question is, isn't it kind of strange? Here you're sitting down to eat, you're sitting down at the Seder, you have the whole family there, all the guests are there, and all of a sudden you start inviting people to come to eat, to come to the Seder. So what's the purpose of it? So anyway, so the idea, first of all, is that, hold on a second. I have over here, basically, this paragraph was added later on to it was not there originally when they wrote the Haggadah. And, hold
But it
on,
doesn't answer the question, why is it in Aramaic?
why is it Aramaic? Of course, it was added later on, and if I recall correctly, you can correct, they were the major language of the Jewish people at the time in Babylonia was Aramaic. They didn't speak Hebrew, they spoke Aramaic. Am I right? Am I wrong? I'm almost sure they spoke only Aramaic. So this was added on later on, and basically the question is why, why they invited people at that point, because basically there was no necessity. And I'm trying to remember what the answer was. Okay.
Called it Srira and called.
We call that, those are the two things, called this right? And that was one, and then it says afterwards,
So the, called the thing, these who need really.
yeah,
How
except the people were eating already, but the second one, the bird basically, so next year they should be in Yerushalayim instead. In other words, they hope for the future that people will be together. In other words, the people who needed food at that time or needed a state of already invited. So at that point, to invite somebody doesn't make sense. Who's gonna come in at that point?
But it makes sense if you think about it, that people who are lonely.
They don't have a place where to go.
That's right, so they in need of company, so they are invited too.
Yeah, right, but the invitations come before pesach, not on pesach. This was on Seder night already. It was already on Seder night. The question is, what was the purpose of that, okay?
Well, maybe to remind you that next year you should plan to help out people who are poor.
That's, I would say that's probably a better answer, right? Okay. He says, call this one, call this, all who are needed, join us for Pesach, it's redundant, okay? And actually, according to what one of them portion, in fact, this case, Rabbi Riskin gives this answer. He says, actually, when it's said twice in here, one is, it refers to two different kind of people. Those who really are poor, basically, we should remember next year to invite them. And also, the second group, when he says called Distra, refers not to poor people, it refers to people who are very comfortable, except they lack the proper background as far as Yiddishkeit is concerned. So he's inviting people to come to the Seder to go ahead and to learn what it's all about. In other words, these are not the poor people, but people who should know more and should learn more, basically, what it's all about.
When you said, it was done in Aramaic, does that indicate we should say it in the language we understand?
If you write a book, obviously, yes, it does. At that time, basically, they spoke Aramaic. And if you're going to invite people, it has to be in a language that they understand. That's why, that's all was written in Aramaic. But again, as I said, it doesn't make too much sense for the simple reason that it's said at the time when the people are already invited. but the interpretation that they give is basically possibly for the next year, etc. Or, and also it refers basically to people who are poor, or also people who are poor in their knowledge of or the observance of the young.
Can't you just open the door and shout out, anybody wants in?
Not, we do that, by the way, later on, we're invited in the door, and nobody, you open the door, we hope he comes in, everybody hopes he comes in, but he can't be all over the place. Okay, Manish Tana is the next big issue over here. And the question is, okay, what's the purpose of it, okay?
Again, and be to the children.
Yeah, well, again, one of the highlights basically is to make sure that the children stay awake for the whole Seder. And it's one of the reasons why we go ahead and tell the children to go ahead and do the Manish Tana. And you're gonna find that almost every family has a child who says it, or all the children say it, etc. In other words, but basically, that's that's the reason basically why we do it. All right, but I'm just, there's some other reasons I'm looking for. The Abarbanel explained that these 4 questions are not 4 independent units. It's one overriding question. Why is this night of Pesach different from every other Jewish holiday? In other words, every holiday has its own unique symbol, okay? On Pesach, they contradict each other. For instance, let's take examples. Rosh Hashanah, what's the symbol of the Rosh Hashanah? Shofar, right? With varying foods. Yom Kippur, what's the highlight of Yom Kippur? Fasting and other prohibitions. Sukkot, we have Sukkot. We have the Sukkah and the 4 species, right? Shavuos, what's the symbol of Shavuos? What's it's dairy, food, and learning Torah, right? And Hanukkah, we have, again, candles, right? And Purim, what do we have? Shalach Manos, etc. How is Pesach different? And because based on Pesach, the symbols contradict each other. We have matzah and maror, okay? So we have the symbol on one hand of a poor man's bread and slavery, dipping and reclining. On one hand, we dip, okay, that's a sign of being rich. Well, it's matzah and maror is a sign of being poor. We need symbols of slavery, poverty to feel like slaves, and we need symbols of freedom and wealth to feel like free people. So in other words, it's in a certain sense, it's almost like a contradiction. In other words, basically, we have both symbols. We have the symbol of slavery and poverty that existed before, and we want people to feel free, freedom and wealth, right? In fact, the Haggadah continue right after Manish Tana. What's the first thing that we say in the Haggadah is Avodim Hayinu, right? So what does the Avodim Hayinu say? We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, but the Lord our God took us out from there, etc., etc. All right, next thing we come across, which I think is a highlight, because the rest I'm skipping a little bit over to there. We're talking about Rabbi Akiva in Bnei Brak. I don't know if you. Just hold on a second. This story is Rabbi Akiva Bnei Brak. The paragraph describes the story of 5 great sages of the Mishnah who discussed the Exodus story all night until their students informed them in the morning that it was time to pray. That's the next thing I'm going to mention. And the question is, why is it important that it took place in Bnei Brak, number 1? All right. Why is it important? Why? And what we learn from that base is, okay, and important to visit the Rebbe on Yom Tov. Rebbe Ratzaf was a senior. He lived in Lod. So if they went to Bnei Brak, and instead of going to Lod, because these were 5 rabbis basically who came there, and usually you go the junior rabbis go to the senior rabbi. The senior rabbi in this case was Rabbi Tafan, who was one of the 5, and he lived in Lod, and yet they went to Bnei Brak. So the question is, why did they come in the first place to Bnei Brak, and why didn't they go to Lod? Anyway, so let me let me explain this in the following way. There's a Gemara in Makos, at the end of the Gemara, the end of the Siyum in the Gemara of Makos, there is again a story which is very similar, includes some of the same people who were there together, and they went ahead and they passed the site of the destruction of the temple, okay? And when they saw the temple was as they approached the destroyed temple, the remnants of the temple, they saw a fox going through the destroyed temple, and they cried as a group, except for Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, instead of crying, when he saw the fox going through the debris of the temple, he basically laughed, and they couldn't understand why did he laugh? I mean, here he saw a temple that was destroyed, and how come that he laughed? So he explained that since part of the prophecy came true, in other words, the prophecy was the fact that the temple would be destroyed. But what was the next part of the prophecy? The other is that Yitz Hashem, that it eventually will be rebuilt. So he said, if the first part of the prophecy was true, so therefore the second part of the prophecy will come true as well, and the temple will be rebuilt. And that's why Akiva had the ability to face a depressing situation, but he was also optimistic, and therefore basically that's why he was able to go ahead and take it lightly. The 5 rabbis did not want to face Pesach, therefore they went to Rabbi Akiva. They brought because they felt that he was the type of person who was able to cheer them up and to make them feel better about things and to look at things optimistically. After that, the next highlight will be in the Haggadah is the Abba Bonim. It's about the 4 children, the 4 sons. And again, the question is basically what is let me just again I should read something. Give me a second. Let me find the 4 sons. Okay, we have the 4 children. Okay, that we have the 4 sons. One of them is the Chacham. Chacham is a wise person. The second one was the Rasha, the person who was a wicked person. The third one was a Tom. Tom is the one who was very confused, didn't know exactly what the Pesach was all about. And She'eino Yodeh Lishol, the 4th one was a child who was not at the age where he could go ahead and ask any questions about that. And the question is, what is the meaning of this this story of the 4 sons? Normally we picture 4 sons with their father at the Seder table, and all brothers have their own views. Okay, in other words, basically he had 4 sons, and one of them was not religious, and one was more religious. One of the Chacham was very wise. The second one was not, etc., etc. But there are other ways of looking at it. And basically, is that instead of looking at 4 brothers in one generation, we could look at it 4 succeeding generations. We have the wise son is the birth to the rebellious son, the simple son, and one who does not know. So it's like it could be expressed in like part of Jewish history. In other words, basically, we had a generation that was very learned and very intelligent, basically, and they basically learned. Then what happened is we have so let's say a father has a son who he tries to get him to emulate him, but he can't, and he rebels against it, and he's the Russia basically, and he turns against religion. Then they have the 3rd son basically the son of the next generation, let's say the son of the Russia, you find very often that we find people who are not religious, all of a sudden, we have the youngsters go visit a grandparent who is from it, they start asking questions of the parents, how come they do this and they do that, we don't do it? And then finally, basically, you have the simple son, the son who doesn't even know, what to ask. But the important thing is to point out the fact, in fact, I would say that the last one, the one that doesn't, we are called the simple son, I would say today, we could refer to him as the Baal Tshuva. In other words, the Baal Tshuva is the one who comes out all the way from left field for some reason or other. He comes across religious aspects, whether it's through a grandparent or anybody else, or they meet somebody, etc. So they start from the point zero and they end up becoming Baal Tshuva. So I would say the last category I would refer to as a Baal Tshuva, the Baal Tshuva movement, which by the way has, I think, done more, I think, in this last generation than any other group as far as growing is concerned. In other words, the Baal Tshuva movement has taken on a life of its own, and basically we have very, very, very many thousands of people who come from point zero and they become more religious. By the way, the number 4 is very prominent in the Haggadah on several occasions. First of all, we have how many cups of wine? 4. We have the Manish Talmud, how many questions? 4. Okay, it's 4 stages of redemption, which we just mentioned now, and the 4 matzahs basically we have the 2.
Also having a 5-year day for tomorrow.
Oh, I forgot to mention, right, in the song, we have 4 mahos, right? So about the 4 mothers, right? In fact, I have it over here in the song, Echabiyah, they are 4 represents the 4 mothers of the Jewish matriarchs, okay? Next thing I want to mention is the Vihish Yomdov. By the way, that's a very important paragraph. Again, I gotta find it. Sorry. Oh,
3 paragraphs there, 4 paragraphs.
what is that? Let me find it. I'm sorry, I should have marked it down. I could do that.
2 paragraphs later. Yeah. It says elevate the wine and meditation. Right after the 4 sons.
Now 4 paragraphs after the 4th one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, there it is. You're right. Thank you. Vihish Yamdalav will say the Volano. It's important to translate that one because it has a lot of meaning, especially today. It says that promise has stood our fathers and ourselves in good stead, for not one persecutor only has risen against us to destroy us, but in every generation there are those who rise against us to destroy us. But the Holy One, blessed be He, always saves us from their hands. This Vihish Yamda could have been written today, because the truth of the matter is, if you go back throughout history, the Jews went through many empires. They went through the Greek Empire, went through the Roman Empire, they went through almost every empire that the Jews lived through. They always were a very small group, basically, comparatively speaking. But in the end, the empires fell apart and the Jews were still there. We had the same situation occur even in most recent times. Look, you had the British Empire, then you had basically the Nazis who tried to destroy the Jewish people, but, and finally, Baruch Hashem, we got to the point where we're in Israel. But I think the important thing is Vehishi Amda is a paragraph that's applicable to the Jews throughout the generations. And it's very important to recognize the fact that it's applicable today, just as it was in past history. Okay. Then we have a paragraph that starts with the words "Tzeil Mat," go out and learn. And I wrote something on this. As mentioned earlier, the rabbis wanted us to learn that entire Haggadah on a deeper level, we talked about basically, hold on a second. I let's put it this way, the Haggadah basically can be understood on different levels. And one of the things that you have to recognize the fact, like I just mentioned, that the Vehish Amda is applicable today as it was in the past. The same things with the rest of Haggadah. I think if you take a look basically at the Haggadah, we see that we are told the story about Lavan and who was a Russia basically. We learned about the fact that Lavan wanted to go ahead and I don't know whether you remember the story, but Lavan, Yaakov worked for Lavan he married his two daughters basically, and he left afterwards. And when he left, Lavan actually went after him because he was not very happy the fact that he took the two daughters. He didn't know that Rachel took the idols and hid them as well. But basically, I think the important thing that Lavan wanted Yaakov, before they left, Lavan and Yaakov made a treaty, and Lavan wanted basically Yaakov to accept the fact that you should not believe in Hashem, but it ended up basically that the treaty was written and signed by Yaakov, only would point out the fact that he still believes in Hashem. That was also a very important point. Let's see what else I have over here. Yeah.
Back to Vehish Amda, if I may, the Vehi is the formula of Jewish survival, according to Abarbanel, I think. The Vav is the reason the Jews survived is because of 6 orders of the Mishnah, is the Vav, the Hay, 5 books of the Torah, the Yud, the 10 Commandments, and one God.
Oh, that's
That's very good.
very good. Okay, that's the Yisham, right? Over the Hayden, okay, very good. Okay, you survive basically. We've got say Yisham that we survive today the way and Yitzhak, hopefully, we continue surviving. But that pointed out before, the Jewish people survived through many empires because of the fact that Hashem was with us.
Yeah.
Very good, very good, okay.
Could he repeat that?
What is that?
Could he repeat that? Could he repeat that?
Repeat what you said.
Repeat what you said.
The word,
I am saying that the Vehi is the formula for Jewish survival.
well,
And the Vav stands for 6 orders of Mishnah, which means really learning and so forth. The Hay is the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, 5 books of Moses.
you need the 10 commandments.
Yud is the 10 Commandments.
And the olive at the end is Hashem. Okay, I think I'm gonna stop over here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, you know, and we all wish you a happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Anymore. Okay.